to be prepared is half the victory. That's from Miguel de Cervantes, and it feels incredibly relevant today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
We're looking at a world, constantly shifting, especially with tensions in places like the Middle East. And for a major player like India with huge energy needs, the big question is, how do you secure that energy supply?
That's exactly it. It's a massive challenge. Global oil markets, well, they react to everything. Think about the recent Iran-Israel conflict, for instance. And then there's the constant worry about those critical sea lanes like the Strait of Hormuz. These aren't just headlines. They directly hit oil prices, global supply chains. It affects everyone, right? So our mission today for this deep dive is to really unpack how India shields itself. We're drawing heavily on a detailed India Today report to see the strategies involved. And this is vital stuff, whether you're preparing for competitive exams like the UPSC or you just want to understand India's resilience. We'll critically look at the planning, the infrastructure, everything that gives India that cushion. Okay, let's start with a geographic pinch point.
Yeah.
The Strait of Hormuz. It's kind of amazing when you look at a map, isn't it? Just 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest, right between Iran and Oman.
Yeah, it looks small, but its importance is just immense. It's basically the only main route for most crude oil and natural gas exports coming out of the Persian Gulf. We're talking Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, huge energy producers, all depending on this one narrow strait.
And Iran sits right there. They've even talked about closing it before, haven't they?
Exactly. Their parliament has approved measures like that in response to things like U.S. sanctions. That obviously ramps up fears about supply disruptions. A blockade there, catastrophic for the global economy.
And that ties directly back to India. India is the world's third largest oil importer, third largest consumer. We import something like 80% of our crude oil.
That's a huge dependency.
We saw how Brent crude prices jumped and then fell back recently. It shows how sensitive the market is.
Absolutely. And you had analysts warning prices could shoot up to $140 per barrel if Hormuz was blocked. Imagine that impact.
Yeah, devastating, especially for developing economies like India. But then you hear India's petroleum minister, Hardeep Singh Puri, expressing confidence. So it really begs the question, how is India managing this? How are we not, losing sleep over these huge global risks?
Right, and the answer isn't one single thing, it's multi-layered. The first big layer, especially in recent years, has been a major push for diversification of crude supply.
Okay, moving beyond the Middle East.
Significantly. India's deliberately looked further afield. We're seeing much more oil coming from places like the United States, Nigeria, Angola, even Brazil.
That's quite a shift. But those routes are much longer, aren't they? Suez Canal, Cape of Good Hope?
They are. Longer transit times, potentially higher shipping costs, different logistical challenges.
So what's the trade-off? Why do that?
It's a calculated strategic move. India is prioritizing geopolitical risk diversification. By using these alternative routes, India lessens its dependence on the Strait of Hormuz. It gives more flexibility if there's a flare-up in the Gulf. It's about having multiple lifelines, essentially.
And part of that diversification, we're going to talk about Russia. India has continued buying Russian oil, even increased it despite Western sanctions. Imports hit a 2-year high, apparently.
Yes, around 2.2 million barrels per day at that peak. That actually surpassed combined imports from Saudi Arabia and Iraq for a time.
That's quite a statement. What are the implications of walking that diplomatic tightrope?
It's complex. There's definitely an economic angle. Discount crude helps. But it's also a strong signal of India's independent foreign policy, securing energy at a good price while asserting the right to engage with partners based on national interest. It's pragmatic. It adds another major supplier to the mix, reducing reliance on any single region, even if it raises eyebrows internationally.
Okay, so diversification is layer one. What's next?
The second crucial layer is India's really robust and growing refining capacity paired with long-term supply agreements.
Refining capacity. How much has that grown?
Quite impressively, it went from about 215 million metric tons per annum in 2014 to nearly 257 MMTPA by April 2024. That spread across 19 public sector refineries, 3 private ones, and 1 joint venture.
And that capacity means more than just volume, right? It's about flexibility.
Exactly. It allows India to process different types of crude oil from all these diverse sources. So if one supply gets disrupted or becomes too expensive, refineries can potentially switch to processing a different kind of crude. It keeps the fuel flowing domestically.
Okay, adaptability and the long-term deals with Saudi Arabia, Iraq, now Russia.
Those provide a foundation of stability. They lock in volumes, often with pricing formulas that smooth out the wild swings you see in the spot market. Think of them as guaranteed baseline supplies. It gives a level of predictability that's invaluable when global markets get choppy.
Right, so diversification, refining muscle, stable contracts. That's a strong defense. But now let's get to the really fascinating part, the underground strategic petroleum reserves, the SPRs, housed in these huge rock caverns. Sounds almost sci-fi.
It's quite incredible engineering, actually, and it's a vital safety net. These SPRs are managed by a dedicated entity, ISPRL, under the Petroleum Ministry. Right now, there are three main facilities, one in Andhra Pradesh, two in Karnataka.
And they're deep underground.
Very deep, about 90 meters below the surface. These caverns can be up to a kilometer long and as high as a 10-story building inside. And just to give you an idea of the scale, the LPG cavern in Visakhapatnam goes down 196 meters below sea level. That's one of the deepest in the world.
Wow, just massive. And what's the total capacity right now?
The current crude oil capacity across those three sites is 5.33 million metric tons,
Which is about,
roughly 38 million barrels.
okay, 38 million barrels.
Yeah.
In terms of days of national consumption, what does that translate to?
Based on 2019 or 2020 levels, that's enough for about 10 days of India's total crude oil needs.
10 days. Some might hear that and think it doesn't sound like a lot. Is it enough to make a real difference?
It's not about running the country indefinitely on reserves. It's about buying time. Critically important time. If there's a sudden price surge or a supply cutoff somewhere, those 10 days allow India to avoid immediate panic. It gives the government and oil companies breathing room to figure out alternatives, wait for prices to stabilize, or arrange new shipments. It's a shock absorber.
And India's been smart about when it fills these reserves too, right? I remember hearing about the 2020 oil price crash.
Absolutely. A prime example. When prices plummeted due to COVID-19, India went on a buying spree. They filled up the caverns with cheap crude, reportedly saving the government something like Rs 5,000 crore.
That's smart, turning a crisis into a strategic advantage.
Precisely. It showed these reserves aren't just dead storage, they can be used opportunistically. And it proved the system works. They could acquire and store huge amounts quickly.
And there are plans to build more of these.
Yes. Phase 2 is approved. 2 more facilities are planned. One in Chandikhol, Odisha, with 4 million tons capacity, and another expansion at Padur in Karnataka, adding 2.5 million tons.
So that's another 6.5 million tons.
Correct. And these are planned as commercial cum strategic reserves, built under a public-private partnership model.
What does commercial cum strategic mean in this context?
It means they'll serve 2 roles. Part of the capacity is for the government's strategic needs, the emergency buffer. But another part can be leased out to private companies or even other countries to store oil commercially. This helps offset the costs of building and maintaining the facilities.
Ah, okay. A more financially sustainable model. And using PPP leverages private sector investment and efficiency.
Exactly. Once Phase 2 is done, the total SPR capacity should cover around 22 days of national demand.
Now, these SPRs aren't the only oil stored in the country, are they? What about the regular stocks held by oil companies?
That's a really important point. You have the dedicated SPRs, the deep reserve, then you add the commercial inventory held by oil marketing companies, the fuel in their tanks at refineries, depots, pipelines across the country. They're working stock.
So SPR plus commercial stocks.
Yes, put them together, and the total buffer gets much larger. Some estimates suggest it could be up to around 74 days of cover.
74 days. That sounds like a much more comfortable cushion.
It definitely provides significant comfort, yes. It puts India in a relatively strong position compared to many other import-dependent nations.
But there has to be a but, right? Is there a caveat from experts on this?
There is, and it's crucial. While 74 days sounds like a lot, experts always emphasize, if imports stop completely and for a prolonged period, the country couldn't run on reserves alone indefinitely. It buys invaluable time, allows for adjustments, but it doesn't eliminate the fundamental need for ongoing imports.
Right. It underscores why diversification remains so critical, even with these reserves.
Absolutely. The reserves are a shield, not a replacement for continuous supply.
Let's circle back to the caverns themselves.
Whoa.
Why go to all the trouble of digging these massive underground structures? Why not just build huge tanks above ground?
There are several really compelling reasons. First and foremost, security. Underground caverns are naturally protected from aerial attacks, sabotage, even natural disasters like earthquakes or typhoons, far better than exposed tanks.
Okay, physical security. What else?
They're also more space efficient on the surface, and while the initial digging is expensive, they can be more cost-effective long-term. You have minimal losses from evaporation, which is a big issue with above-ground tanks. Maintenance can be lower. Plus, environmental safety. They're designed to be sealed, preventing leaks into the ground or water table. It's a very contained system.
That makes sense. Using geology itself as protection. And this idea isn't unique to India.
No, not at all. The concept actually started in Sweden, mainly for wartime security. Other countries like Finland, Japan, South Korea adopted it too, adapting it to their own needs.
And India's journey started when?
The idea really gained traction in 1998 under Prime Minister Vajpayee's government. It was a direct lesson learned from the 1990 Gulf War. That crisis really exposed India's vulnerability to oil import disruptions and spurred the move towards building these strategic reserves.
A clear case of learning from geopolitical shocks and planning long term.
Definitely. And India continues to assess potential new sites for future expansion. It's an ongoing process reflecting that proactive approach.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. For our listeners, especially those maybe studying for the UPSC or just trying to understand India's place in the world, what's the key takeaway here?
I think the big picture is India's multi-pronged strategic foresight. It's this blend of diplomatic maneuvering for diverse energy sources, building serious industrial muscle with refining capacity, and then this really clever engineering with the underground reserves. It's not about being totally immune to global shocks, no country is. It's about being prepared, constantly evaluating risks, and having a clear strategy. And of course, the long-term goal is also shifting towards renewables, reducing that fossil fuel dependency overall. But for now, this layered approach gives India significant resilience.
A powerful combination indeed. It really highlights proactive national planning. So, looking ahead, as the world navigates energy transitions and these constant geopolitical shifts, what are the next challenges or frontiers for India's energy security? How does it balance needing fossil fuels now with the urgent push for green energy? And how might unexpected global events reshape this vital strategy further? That's something to think about. If this deep dive helped you understand India's energy shield better, maybe give us a like and subscribe to the deep dive for more analysis like this. Let us know in the comments if you have questions or other topics you'd like us to tackle. Your feedback really helps us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for knowledge.